between two conflicting estimates. Somebody is lying.
All right, my Z gang. All right, my lovers, my pro gang. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, just testing. Last time I was so sad. I did like an recording before, and I wasn't capturing the sound. So there's me talking and saying a bunch of stuff, but there's no audio. I didn't capture the audio, so that was a bummer. So anyway, here we are. Let's take a look at this video. This video is about a lady, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She's essentially, I mean, I would call her an anti-fascist. She's wrote papers on race and theory, and let's take a look at her biography really quick before we watch the video. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we got a Dr. Frances Welsing. Okay, born 1935, died 2016, rest in power. Okay, so her big essay, her 1970 essay, The Cress Theory of Color, Confrontation, and Racism, White Supremacy, offered the interpretation of the origins of what she described as the white supremacy culture. She is the author of the ISIS Papers, the Keys to Color, in 1991. Welsing caused controversy after she said that homosexuality among African Americans was a ploy by white males to decrease the black population. Okay, so she was born in Chicago, 1935. Her father was a doctor, was a physician, and her mother was a teacher. She earned her BS from Antioch College, and in 1962 received her MD from Howard, and she moved to Washington, D.C. She became a doctor, worked in hospitals, and she worked in children's hospitals. While Welsing was an assistant professor at Howard, she formulated her first body of work, 1968, The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation, self-published it in 1970. The paper subsequently appeared in 1974 edition of the Black Scholar. This was the introduction of her thoughts that would be developed in the ISIS Papers. 22 years later, she released the ISIS Papers, a compilation of essays she had written about global and local race relations. Okay, so she did, let's see. Okay, so some of her views. In the ISIS Papers, she described white people as genetically defective descendants of albino mutants. She wrote that due to this defective mutation, they may have been forcibly expelled from Africa, among other possibilities. Racism, in the views of Welsing, is a conspiracy that ensure white genetic survival. She attributed AIDS, the addition of crack cocaine, and other substances to chemical and biological warfare by white people. Welsing created the definition of racism, which in her theory of non-white genocide globally, she refers to racism and white supremacy synonymously. Her definition is racism, white supremacy is the logic and global power system dynamic, structured and maintained by those who classify themselves as white. Whether consciously or subconsciously determined, the system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people actively. Economics, education, entertainment, law, labor, politics, religion, sex, war. The ultimate purpose of the system is to ensure white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth. A planet in which the overwhelming majority of people classified as non-white, black, brown, red, yellow, by white-skinned people. All of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. Welsing was against white supremacy and the emasculation of black men. So Welsing, some of the criticisms about her was the emasculation of black men and her kind of focus on gayness being a device used to emasculate black men, which, you know, obviously I'm not going along with those particular views. But in terms of her, just the ISIS paper reviews, that's heavy stuff. because there's not really anything that she's saying. I, I mean, to me, that's, I mean, it's not untrue. I mean, like, if I mean, this is basically what Nazis will tell you all the time. People who want ethno states, they'll basically tell you that they want their fears. Some of their fears are white genocide, right? Some of their fears are like the fact that, and white genocide doesn't always come in the form of like violence. A lot of it is just you breeding them out, right? It's like you can breed them out. You don't even need to be violent. If we just allow these people to exist and they start intermingling with us, white people will eventually disappear. So, I mean, I think that would be pretty accurate as far as the anxieties that white supremacists have and kind of they act upon. So yeah, I don't know that there's much to disagree with that. That's pretty factual as opposed to opinion. It's like even from the mouths of white supremacists. Okay, so now she's versus a gentleman named William Shockley. I use the term gentleman lightly. I mean, he's a very gentle, soft-spoken man, but let's listen. Okay, so he was born 1910 to 1989. He was an American physicist and inventor. Shockley was the manager of a research group at the Bell Labs that included John Bardeen and Walter Brattain. The three scientists were jointly awarded the 1956 Nobel Prize for Physics for their research on semiconductors and the discovery of the transistor effect. Okay, so again, he was a good engineer, semiconductors, and the discovery of the I'm not sure what that would have to do so much with eugenics, but let's continue. Partly as a result of Shockley's attempt to commercialize a transistor, California Silicon Valley became a hotbed of electronics innovation. Okay, he's from Stanford. He lived in Northern California. Let's look at the controversial part of his. Okay, so let's look at his political views. Okay, late in life, Shockley became intensely interested in the question of race and human intelligence and eugenics. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. He thought this was an important to the genetic future of the human species, and he came to describe it as the most important work of his career, even though expressing his views damaged his reputation. Shockley argued that a high rate of reproduction amongst less intelligent was having a dysgenic effect, and that the drop in the average intelligence would ultimately lead to the decline in civilization. With regard to racial differences, he used standard phraseology, for example, in debate with the physicist or psychiatrist he's a physicist, she's a psychiatrist, Frances C. Welling on Fireline. Okay, so that's what we're going to watch. Shockley published writings and lectures to scientific organizations on the topic were partly based on the writings of psychologist Cyril Burt and were funded by the Pioneer Fund. Shockley also proposed that individuals with low IQs below 100 be paid to undergo voluntary sterilization. Anthropologist Roger Pearson has defended Shockley in self-published book co-authored with Shockley, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee professor Edgar G. Epps argued that Shockley's position lends itself to racist interpretations. Okay, so he was actually saying that's not great. In 1981, he filed a libel suit against the Atlanta Constitution against a science writer, Roger Witherspoon, compared Shockley's advocacy to voluntary sterilization program to the Nazi human experimentation. The suit took 3 years to go to trial. Shockley won the suit, but received only $1 in damages and no punitive damages. Shockley's biographer, Joel Shurkin, and a science writer on the staff of the Stanford University during those years, sums this up by saying the statement was defamatory, but Shockley's reputation was not worth much by that time. The trial ended and reached a verdict. Shockley taped his telephone conversations with the reporter and then sent his transcriptions to them by registered mail. At one point, he toyed with the idea of making them take a simple quiz on his work before discussing the subject with him. His habit of saving all of his papers provides abundant documentation in the research of his life. OMG. Okay. Let's get into it. You know what's good. Okay, so we're gonna start a little bit inside this because you need to.
Not effective with these white students at Staten Island Community College, so I would have a chance to speak. In fact, I think they prevented her from saying what she wanted to say when she was trying to gain me a platform. So my main theme is that we have problems that we should face and we should look at connected with dysgenics, and I welcome
Dysgenics.
any opportunity I have to bring this out so that people can look at it and worry about it.
Dr.
Okay, so this is something that he wants to come out, bring out, so that we can worry about it. I pause because this is how I take in information. I really try to take people one phrase at a time and really just kind of understand where he's coming from. Let's
Shockley, you are accused of having a theory that is a white racist theory. How do
just straight up, sharp-looking brother right there. I like that look. You know, if you're accused of having racist theories, I mean, what you think? I mean, what percentage do you think that you probably racist? I don't know. I think it's a high percentage.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying that I've considered whether or not I am a racist. Racist is an epithet that used to damage my self-esteem, but it doesn't anymore. I feel it's untrue. If you look in the dictionary as to what racist means, it means emotional feelings, irrational feelings associated with fear and hate.
Okay, so let's take a second. He said some important things there. He said that being called a racist used to damage his self-esteem. Now, I don't know if he's being honest or hyperbolic, or or he actually feels that way. But you know, the way some white people react to being called a racist, or the idea that someone might think of them as racist, they react heavy to that. It's almost like being called the N-word to some white people. So it's interesting to hear him, 1974 say, it used to damage my self-esteem being called a racist. That's deep. I mean, I don't, do y'all believe that or what? Like, okay. And then it's like, he's like, no, I'm not, because of the dictionary. Like, when did the dictionary exist? Like, did you not have a dictionary before? Like, how long did it take you to just pick up the dictionary and look up racism? If it used to damage your self-esteem so that all you had to do is go read the dictionary to get over it. That's kind of the story he's telling, right? It used to damage my self-esteem being called a racist, but I found the dictionary one day, and this is a guy who's won a Nobel Prize, right? And you wanted me to believe that all it took was like the dictionary. How long did you have a dictionary for it to take you to I just needed to read the dictionary, and now I get it now. Okay, so the dictionary more powerful than people's lived experience. Okay, no problem.
If I really had those, I don't think I would be here this evening. I feel that what I'm engaged in is a demand for diagnosis, and I'd like to say some more about this chart, which we'll come to probably later, which...
Okay, so you also said if I was a racist and I hated black people or hated people of color, I wouldn't be on this show today. I don't know. Maybe he actually believes that. I don't know if he's just, it's like I want to call him a grifter, but like he's an accomplished man with like everything to you got more to lose to go on this route than he has to gain, honestly. So it's hard for me to call him a grifter because he looks like this is a professor. He looks like he's had a good life. He's made a lot of money. He doesn't need to do this. It's clearly later in his life, so he could just chill. But for whatever reason, this is how he wants to spend the remaining days of his life, and his privilege and the money and all the things that he's made out of his life. He wants to now prove to you that, he's not racist though.
Shows the disproportionate rates of reproduction for the least effective elements of the black community. I'd like to say more about that than we should.
Okay. So he's a dysgenics guy, right? So he's basically ultimately saying that like the population of people who are not as smart should not get married, not get married, not have children, right? So he's gonna pull out his little graph, his little I'm not racist chart. I'm not racist because I made a chart. Basically saying that black people and white people in rural areas who tend to have less education have more babies than people who have higher educations. So we're breeding more we're breeding less educated people ultimately of both races. So I'm not racist, right? Both races. But it affects black people more, is what he said. Again, you can watch the video. I'm going to put the link so you can watch the whole video and make those decisions for yourself. This is my interpretation.
Basic belief that truth is a good thing and will be of benefit to man.
Thank you. Dr. Frances Welsing, give us the benefit of your theory, please.
Well, my theory was, I wrote the paper in 1969. I wrote a paper called The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. And the sole reason behind writing that paper was an attempt to understand the behavior of white people in relationship to all people of color, every place in the world, black, brown, red, and yellow people. And the paper was presented to the Americans at the National Medical Association, the section on psychiatry in neurology, because back in 1969, the Black Caucus in the American Psychiatric Association, we had said that racism, and when we talk about racism, we're talking about the white supremacy behavior of white people, that racism was the #1 mental health problem in the nation, and it was the #1 cause of other mental health problems.
I just want to pause there to just bring up a point, right? You get a lot of white supremacists, you get a lot of Tucker Carlson type people, the people on Fox News, always trying to make race. Oh, everyone can be racist. Everyone can be racist. Most people of color, when we're talking about racism, we're talking about white supremacy, which again, in 1964, in her papers, she was writing it's a system of domination, of oppression. So, the Ben Shapiro's of the world who are like, the definition has changed. That thing saying the definition has changed is literally this Dr. Shockley before, or the Professor Shockley saying, I went to the dictionary. And racism means when you're mean to someone, when you're mean because someone is different than you and you think they're inferior. No. Racism is it's a system that helps economics. It helps you. It's a system of power. That's what it is. You gain power by your skin tones, and you're able to preserve whatever culture you think you're trying to preserve by using that system of racism. It's not a one-on-one, oh, everybody's racist, because black people can also say racial slurs. Yes, black people can say racial slurs. Absolutely. Black people can super be bigots. Black people can even hate white people. But they have not ever in the past created systems to intentionally disenfranchise them. If they have, please make a video or make a comment about a system that black people have created to create outcomes that favor them at the detriment of white people. Not some black people beat me up when I was living in the trailer park and we were all poor, therefore white privilege doesn't exist. I'm not interested in that. You can take that to Ben Shapiro. I'm sure he loves those stories.
And I wanted to understand what this thing of racism really is all about, because it's the thing that has caused woe and misery and suffering for the vast majority of the people on this planet that are classified as non-white. And in my attempt to understand why the necessity of white people to keep saying that white is superior and that the condition of non-white is inferior, and the more I thought about it, in conjunction with an idea that a friend of mine had, that racism was a worldwide behavioral system for the maintenance of white supremacy by a small minority of people, I put those ideas together with what we know about genetics, what we know about the condition of skin whiteness itself. The condition of skin whiteness is the genetic inability to produce skin pigment called melanin. This is a genetic recessive trait. It is a genetic deficiency state, not as defined by Frances Welsing, but defined by geneticists and dermatologists, that the inability to produce the skin pigment of melanin or melanin pigment is described as albinism. And I think that white people, even though most white people are not consciously understanding their problem in genetics. They are certainly aware that they are genetically dominated by people of color. That's why it was a statement, one drop of black blood makes you black, because people of color have the genetic capacity to annihilate white people. And so unless white people control the reproductivity of people of color, then we can postulate that perhaps one day there won't be any white people. And I think that the very survival of white people necessitates that they project genetic inferiority on people of color, because it is they who really are aware that they are genetic recessive and perhaps genetically inferior to people of color. And I am not saying this to call the condition of skin whiteness to say, well, no, white people are inferior. I'm not saying it for that purpose, but I think that it is of prime importance for the majority of people in the world to understand why it is that white people have to, the effective majority, large numbers of white people, have to move in a hostile and an aggressive way against people of color, and have to constantly focus on it's you who's genetically inferior, because they realize that there's something wrong with their genetic status. Now,
may I take a call?
Oh, sure,
all
please.
Right.
Whoa. Ho, 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 ho. And that, the funny thing is, I never, until I watched this video, I never really thought of it like that. I mean, I didn't, because, the idea of thinking of someone as inferior and superior is super distasteful to me. But that's the problem with white supremacists, is they force you to do that. When I grew up, from watching television and the news, I just felt that black people were more violent and they're going to do more crime. So I had to be introspective. I said, am I more likely to do crime and do violence? Is my IQ low? Am I not able to do well in school? Am I stupid because black people are? That's how I felt growing up, like that black people were inferior. I felt that way. I even though I didn't say it out loud, I definitely felt like, oh, well, white people are they're better at sciences, or they're better at things that are studying and education. And it's obviously that's damaging. And I think the people like these Worsley or the Shockley people, they peddle that stuff under the guise of it's just facts and logic. And again, it's hard to see where this guy's coming from, because this guy won a Nobel Prize, so I don't know why he's so focused on this subject. But that's what Dr. Cress says. It's the most important thing. It's not even really to debate, who has higher IQ or less IQ, and who's genetically superior and who's inferior. The more important thing is, why are you so preoccupied with this? All these graphs and these writings are dedicated to proving that people who are not as, intelligent as the doctor, right? Because he's not going to include himself in the sterilization. It's always going to be for other people. So people see some arbitrary level, like an IQ of 100. So do you see how IQ is always used in a negative way? It's never used in a positive way. So kill people with an IQ under 100. Why? Is there something about having a higher IQ that automatically makes you a better person in society? Ed Kemper, serial killer, had an IQ of 145. What does that mean? He's okay because his IQ's higher? What is that? I just don't get that argument. That's such some sad shit. It's always receding too. Back when it was long enough ago and there was no real evidence of it, white people used to say they were genetically superior in terms of athletically. They used to say that they were genetically superior to black people until the sport shit started happening, and then they're well, we're smarter than them. And it's no one needs, white people start that shit. There's no doubt about it. I've never heard a group of Africans have a group where they're we need to be superior than the freaking white. It's just it's white people. It's I never heard of that in a black culture. So this thing she's bringing up is so important. It's why are you so preoccupied with this? And I'm actually a little bit confused. Some people, who are on this shit, like Ben Shapiro, he's not talented, right? He hasn't done, he'll never do anything of noteworthiness in his life, but this doctor actually has. So it's kind of odd to me that he's so preoccupied. It's almost like even the smartest people can get preoccupied with kind of nonsense, because it's like he spent all his privilege and his power dedicated to like black people should be sterilized. That
Let me, so that, because we have a number of calls, and we'll see what the public wants to find out also. Just 1 second. Hello, go ahead, please. You're on Black Journal.
I would like to ask the question, why does the doctor feel that his theory, Dr. Shockley, why did you feel that your theory is correct?
Well, let me say that's a long question. Let me point out one aspect. I mean, it's a question that calls for a very long answer. I think I might just at this point say that in a time like 1 hour, we may expose a problem and encourage thinking about it, and this is a very valuable thing. But to cover either Dr. Welsing's views or mine, and let me say here are, just to show that these things exist, is a pamphlet that she was good enough to give me some time ago.
This one's upside down.
Well, that one's upside down.
Yeah,
thank you.
Right.
he's asking him why you think you're right. Just give him a straight answer. Why are you pulling out pamphlets? Like, they always do that. You go do some research. No, just tell me. You're literally here to represent your position. Why do you think this position is the right thing? Like, and he's like,
and this is one of my own. It's actually a collection of a
I mean, that seems a little grifty to me. Like, you're just kind of promoting your shit right now. Like, just answer the question. No one asked about your bloody pamphlet.
debate.
The imperatives of ethnic education is yours.
This is the issue of the journal.
The imperatives of ethnic education. You know that's always going to lead to something great for non-white people, right? Yeah, like at the end of reading that book, let's get together and leave the differences behind and build a society where you focus more on your, your interests and the things you're all about. Is that what's going to happen after reading the imperatives of that? That's going to bring us together, I bet. Just read that and you'll get over your racial shit. You know, to all the Ben Shapiros and all the white supremacists out there is like, oh, it's a one-on-one thing. No. Racism, really, what I mean white supremacy. Like, racism isn't a black person problem. Like, they don't have a problem with other races, you know? We're just waiting for white people to just chill the fuck out. That's all. When we're saying racism, when I'm saying racism, I'm just saying maybe one day soon white supremacists will chill the fuck out, you know? And people like Tucker Carlson and shit, and Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder and Joe Rogan will be exposed for the clowns, the mediocre, below mediocre clowns that they are. Like, even this guy, he's taken his whole career and now he's committed to clownery. Like, he malfunctioned and shit on some racist shit. Sad.
Mine was, the title of my paper is somewhat different from this, but I want to say that speaking for myself, if people would like to write to me at Stanford University, I have a post box there, Post Box S, which is the same as Shockley and Stanford. I will try to supply more information, and I'm sure Dr. Welsing will say what she can do about telling people how to reach her pamphlet. Okay. But now let me say this chart.
Yeah, that's super grifty, dude. And look at her. She's just looking at him like, she's not trying to sell a frickin' thing. She's just trying to expel you. She's just doing anti-fascist shit right now. Yes, this is anti-fascism right now. This is anti-fascism in work. One of them's a fascist. One of them is not. One of them is for forced sterilization. One of them is for education programs and healthcare.
You could turn it around the other way, where you could have very large numbers of black people who are exposed to educational opportunities like white people, who are exposed to housing, who are exposed to health facilities. Why don't you explain that at the same time that you put figures like that?
I'm sure you would explain it,
no, but
Dr.
I think
Welsing.
It's important
but
in
one must say first thing.
Okay, so this is a problem I have with the conservatives always. It's like, it's always like, black people have, they can't say, you can't say IQ as much now. Like 10 years ago you could say IQ, but, you know, because white people are slow. We knew this in 1974, but like mainstream corporate white media is very, very slow. So it took them up until like basically up until Trump to figure out IQ is dog whistling for I'm a racist. But he used to get away with it. Now, okay, so let's talk about this IQ thing. IQ thing will always lead to White people are smarter. We'll throw Asians a bone because we're not really scared of Asians doing outbreeding us. It allows them to not be racist, right? We're better than blacks, but Asians are better than us. So hey, everybody's blah, 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 blah. Oh, who? But you know, blacks will always end up at the bottom when you're talking IQ. Always end up at the bottom. You already know my IQ has got to be the lowest, right? Because my skin and my culture, gotta have it because of my skin and my culture. So the IQ will always lead to basically we've got to do harmful things to them. Dr. Welsing is basically saying that. How come your shit never leads to housing, education? How come it always just leads to something negative? You have a low IQ, and now we must do something. We must sterilize you. I wish he would explain, like, and again, this is something that I really loathe about IQ people. Can you explain to me something that you can do because of your IQ that the average person cannot? Now, in William Stokely's case, he's a Nobel-winning prize physicist. How many people can claim that, right? Very, 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 very low percentage of the population, doesn't matter what race you are, can claim they've won a Nobel Prize. So are we to live up to that standard? Because most white people ain't living up to that standard. If that's what it, I mean, what is your high IQ doing? Oh, what is it? Is it making better societies? Is it is it because your high IQ led to colonialism? I wish they would just tell me, okay, because I don't have a high IQ like you. So I want to know what am I missing out on because of my low IQ? What would I be able to do with the IQ of a white man that I could not do because my IQ is of a black man? I just want to know. Just tell me. I want to know what I'm missing. Like, you know, it's almost like, you know, if you were never allowed to eat meat, but you really want it, like, so pay someone to describe, like, the taste of meat for you. Like, there was a David Cross sketch like that. I just would love for them to describe the experience of a high IQ person and tell me what I'm missing so that I can really be like, because if you explain to me why my low IQ is hurting me, then maybe I'm willing to accept it. But you never explain it. Just tell me what you can do that I can't do. You know, I just want to know. Is creating new types of music low IQ? So when you create jazz music, is that a low IQ thing or a high IQ thing? Because I like all types of music. I mean, I like classical music too. Is classical music high IQ or low IQ? Or does IQ have anything to do with the creation of music? I don't know. Like, just tell me. Tell me, okay, high IQ people would make classical music, low IQ people would make jazz. I wish they would just do something like that. Like, if you're low IQ, you would just say something like that so that I can have something to connect IQ to. But IQ it's this nebulous, I don't know what it means. But I guess when you're dog whistling to someone, you already know what it means, right? It means like, okay, he's racist, he's dumb because he's black. We already know that, but he doesn't ever make no connection, so he's got to be dog whistling. If you don't tell me things that you can do with your high IQ that I cannot, then you're dog whistling for white supremacy. Just give me one example of what your high IQ as a white person is unattainable. Something a white man has done as a result of their IQ that a black man will never be able to do. But what they're saying is, our societies, which we use your labor to build, which we use forced brown labor to build our societies, those are an example of our higher IQs because we force you to build cities and work on our plantations.
Things first. And you've raised the basic question there, and that is whether the disadvantages are primarily a lack of opportunity or whether they are primarily a basic genetic difference.
Okay. This argument rages to this day, except for we slid out that word genetic difference. You can't use that no more. You can't use that no more. You know what word they use? They use culture. They use the word culture. Oh, it's the culture. It's the culture. Because you can't say genetic difference. Genetic difference, if you say IQ and genetics in 2020, that's not dog whistling. That's foghorning. You can't do that no more. And still, because the racist people like him, they get off on the plausible deniability. Oh, I'm just being logical. But you can't say genetics and IQ anymore and still be like, I'm the logical guy. Now you have to say culture. So they didn't just change the world up now. Culture is what they use. So Ben Shapiro, this is what Ben Shapiro would have been back then. He's smarter than Ben Shapiro. This guy's actually talented and accomplished, and actually is a more effective propagandist than Ben Shapiro because he's way smarter. But nonetheless, they're basically on the same mission. They're on a mission to tell you black people are inferior. It's inherent. There's nothing you can do. Let's just sterilize them. But I'm not a Nazi, though.
And let me mention one thing, which is that in certain areas there is no doubt about black superiority. Blacks are superior in visual acuity, and they're superior in a systematic way. Now, I don't expect that people will understand the details of this, but I simply want to show that quantitative work can be done. This happens to be a research job of my own, and what it shows, because these points that you...
And again, you know his solutions are never going to be positive. They won't. His solutions for the IQ thing of black people or dumb people will never be like, give them more educational opportunities. It will never be something good for those people. Never. Never something to lift them up. Ever. Never.
See here lie on a line which is not the central line, but they lie systematically on a line. What it says is that so far as visual acuity is concerned, blacks are systematically better than whites. It's as if their bell-shaped curve, their distribution curve, were pushed upwards compared to whites for visual acuity, or at least...
Okay, so black people, we're throwing you a bone. You're dumb as shit. Your IQ is low, you know, and that's genetics. But your visual acuity, dang, y'all can see shit really well. Gosh darn it, like chickens.
At least for the avoidance of bad eyesight, such that if the same shift occurred for IQ...
I mean, everybody in my family wears glasses, so we're like double shit. We're like, not only are we inferior because we're black, we're blacks with shitty eyesight. Oh my gosh. This guy is a grave digger, man. He a grave digger. Killer clown, bro.
It would mean that the average IQ distribution would be up by 9 points rather than down by about 15 points, which is the typical average.
Dr. Shockley, visual acuity is probably something that the system of white supremacy has not necessarily seen the need to affect the environment that black people are in so that it will alter the fact that they have visual acuity that is superior to whites. The fact of visual acuity is not attacked in the same way as educational opportunity and job performance is attacked. And I think that
it's evidence for a...
So she's just going back to, all your evidence never leads to something beneficial, is basically what she's saying. All your visual acuity is never going to lead to job opportunities or never going to lead to anything positive, so who cares?
Genetic difference, in
well,
my
you see what
opinion.
I'm saying? There might be many, many more genetic differences where people of color appear superior.
If I may, we have a number of people.
And again, you notice how she said appear superior, because she's actually not there to prove that one is superior to the other. She's there to fight the Nazis. This is how anti-fascism always works. Nazis come, talk smack, people are inferior, and if you don't challenge this guy, he's going to get bolder, wilder with it, crazier with it, shape of the head, phrenology. You need these type of people like Dr. Welsing to come and smack that shit down. Because when William Shockley hangs out with a bunch of white people and he doesn't have to hang out with black people, at best, they'll just be like, oh, just ignore him. This is, it's weird. I don't want to be out, you know. And at worst, they're like, yeah, I'm down for that, you know. It's like white people aren't super confrontational, especially with racism. So when there's no people of color around, they're like, well, who cares if he's being racist? There ain't no black people. Very few white people are going to be like, let's ruin Thanksgiving over, you know, some racist shit because, you know, if there are no black people, if there are no people of color there, you know. So most of the time with this anti-fascist stuff, it's because these fools just come out, they keep talking, and then the anti-fascist Dr. Francis comes to put the smack down. She's like, you're a little baby. You're scared of like a disappearing genetically, so as a reaction to your fear, like black people are inferior. Nobody cares about that shit but white supremacists. I've never met black people who are insistent that white people are inferior or superior one way or the other. Mainly, we're just saying, hey, we just need to get a break from this fucking nonsense you guys are on. It's not the discussions I have with black people about race aren't about genetics. That shit is weird, dog. Like, so weird to be talking about genetics when you're talking about race to me. But whatever. But it's more of a like a social thing of how you interact with people. But they're like, nah, I fuck that. It's about genetics. Like, that shit is weird. I'm not like, only white supremacists are on that genetic shit. That's super weird to me.
People, and we'd like to get to as many as possible. If you could make your
It's almost like I want to be a dickhead anyway, so I never want to change the social part of myself. So let's just use science to be like, yeah, nah, the black people have low IQ, so when we treat them shitty and do slavery, it's not that big a deal because their IQs. I don't know, what is an lower IQ? I just still don't get it. Is an lower IQ like that's why they were slaves? Like what? Like that's why we should be cruel to them? So he never wants to, he'll never discuss white supremacy and the actions and the violence of white people historically. It's more about IQ. Let's talk about IQ. No, let's just talk about the actions. That's what we're talking. The race relations means how do people of races interact, right? And then you want to talk about genetics. But we're talking about race. Race relations and genetics too, it's not even the same thing. You're just have an agenda where you're like, I just want to treat black people the way I do anyway, so let me just say their IQ is lower, then whatever I do next, who cares? They're low IQ.
Your answers is not to compromise your explanation. But if you could make your answers as succinct, I would appreciate it, because we would like to involve the public as much as we can. One moment, please. You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering if Dr. Shockley could explain the basic difference between the course he is taking in explaining white supremacy and the course that Hitler took.
Okay, what's the difference between his theory and the Hitler? Just before he answers this, I'm gonna give William Shockley a shout out. You know, I'm gonna give him some gangsterism to go on a black show where everyone's black and it's Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, Joe Rogan, they'll never go on an all-black show to answer for their shit. They would never do that. They would never do that. This homie did, so I give him props. Motherfuckers was built different back then. Y'all were built different back then because the snowflake conservatives of today, they don't even argue with black people about race anymore. They argue with another white person about race. They argue with like the white liberals about race now. They don't even talk to black people.
During the Nazism reign.
Thank you.
Well, there are enormous differences. In fact, the lesson to be learned from Nazi history is frequently very misunderstood, and it is a lesson which Mr. Brown...
The lessons of Nazi Germany are frequently misunderstood? Who the hell's misunderstanding Nazi Germany? How are you not look at this fool. He looked like a SS. If I gave you this picture and was like, this fool ran a concentration camp, Joseph von Henkelbottom, and he cremated fools and just put like Photoshop some freaking regalia, some SS regalia on this fool, and you wouldn't even miss a beat. Look at the dark, brooding eyes. Oh my gosh. He's like, y'all didn't learn the lesson of Nazi shit right. I'm about to teach you that shit. Y'all see, remember when y'all was like on that Nazi shit and the conclusions y'all came to on Nazi shit? Y'all was wrong. I got the knowledge. I got the juice. I got the juice on the Nazi shit. Okay, you know that Nazi shit so well. Tell us.
Has told us about earlier, it's the First Amendment. It's not the...
He said First Amendment. Freedom of speech. Can you name me one Nazi grifter, one white supremacist grifter, one conservative grifter that doesn't bring up freedom of speech? Why does that? We're talking about race relations, dog. Why? Say what you want to say. You on the television? Like, what is he? Dr. Francis just isn't complaining about free speech because she's a communist and she doesn't care. She likes her speech being stifled, but all those other people who don't get Nazism, who just don't get it like you do, they don't get free speech. Dr. Francis, she doesn't get free speech. She wants her speech to be controlled, but you don't. You want to be able. Yeah, just like me. I want someone to tell me what I can say because I'm a commie. That's why. I hate expressing myself freely because I'm a commie and I hate America. Such a baby. Freedom of speech. We're talking about race relations, dog, and you're saying freedom of speech. Why are you going there? Because you're a freaking Nazi.
That eugenics is intolerable. Actually, the eugenic programs, which are the opposite of dysgenics, eugenic programs are not inconceivable. They're not inhumane.
It's not that bad, yo. You know, a lot of people say eugenics is like, is bad, but it's conceivable. It's actually not that bad. I'm not racist, and I'm not a Nazi.
Denmark has been
It's just that eugenics is dope.
carrying out programs with strong eugenic implications for maybe 30 years. And it's important to note that since World War II,
Don't go to Denmark.
Denmark's per capita homicide rate dropped and is now approximately 1/20th. That is the number of deaths of probability of being killed in a year by a violent homicide.
I love, it's like, it's like this conservative. Imagine if Denmark enacted a program which said, hey, you should give people money and a house, and it actually lowers the rate of crime if you just invest in their communities. Do you think he'd give a shit what Denmark said? All of a sudden, he's scouring through, Denmark. I bet you his statistics are bullshit anyway, because it's 1974, so there's probably no way of confirming this, that he's telling the truth. You know, I think he's a liar. But maybe someone has statistics from 1970 or whenever this period he's talking about of this eugenics program in Denmark being dope and providing, less crime. There is a theory, if you read a lot of, I have an interest in like serial killers and stuff like that. I like reading true crime stuff. And there is a theory that the, Roe versus Wade, women being able to have abortions and legally have abortions, and the drop in lead, as a lead additive as far as gasoline and paint and everything, had a major effect on dropping crime. So in terms of like eugenics, in terms of like parents not having children that they can't handle and want to, you see what I'm saying? He'll never support a program where a kid is like, I am pregnant, can I have an abortion? He would never do that. But if you want to sterilize yourself, I'm down for that. If you want to sterilize yourself forever, I'm good with that. If you want to have one abortion, maybe you were going to have other children, but you just weren't ready at that point, and you need, no. I'd rather you sterilize yourself forever. Abortions, no. Sterilization, yes. Because why? What's the difference? Because an abortion is the individual taking democracy into their own hands and saying, this is what I want to do with my body. Forced sterilization is me telling you gotta sterilize yourself, or I'm going to pay you to sterilize, or whatever he's talking about. He doesn't want, because he is right about one thing, right? Education will help you not have as many babies, but he'll never say the solution is let's have more education programs. Right? See, that's what I'm saying. That's why I can't stand these type of people. He'll literally sit there and say, education helps you make better decisions, but let's not provide educational opportunities. Let's just do sterilization. Let's not educate people. Let's sterilize them. That is so radical and like Nazi. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, dog. Like, that's what that shit is. It's like, oh, like education help. He even brought out his own chart, brought this shit out. If you have a college degree, you're more likely to make a better decision as far as your reproduction. So my solution is sterilize them. See, any reasonable person who heard that, who took him to be a reasonable person, would think, oh, the next thing he's going to say is, and then what you should do is give them education. So they'll, like, what is that? How do you take that, like, freaking veer off the path like that?
Is roughly, the order of 100 times less for young Danes than it is for young American blacks.
Can I?
Now, but the lesson, let me say what the lesson of Nazi history we have in this country, and it will protect us. It's just the thing that makes this program possible. the First Amendment, which allows freedom of speech. If one believes that is not the right answer, then one has to be one of the most anti-German racists there can be. If one believes that the German people would have tolerated the concentration camps and the gas chambers.
And now he did that like racist white. If you don't believe in freedom of speech, you're an anti-German racist. When you say anti-German, are Germans, why are we just against white people or German? Maybe I'm just against Germans. I don't know, whatever. That's just such a, I mean, that's what all conservatives do. You're the racist. He had to throw that in. If you don't believe in freedom of speech, you're an anti-German racist. I'm an American, dog. I'm a patriot. I'm American. What are you talking about being anti-German? Who the fuck cares if you anti-German in America? If you anti-German in Germany, that's a whole nother deal. But we in America, Jack. Why are you all over in Denmark and Germany and shit all of a sudden? Conservatives never like those countries' solutions when it's helpful. If they were like, oh yeah, they do a UBI, you should do it. You think you're gonna go along with that? No. That's what I told you. Any conservatives will always look for a data which says do something harmful to black people. Then they like that data. Let's bring that one in. Build a school for black kids and treat them kindly. Fuck that shit. Send them off to war to go kill other brown people. Yeah, I'm down for that. I'm down for that.
If news media, like the programs that Mr. Brown is setting on, if those people were willing to bring discordant views out into the open, I don't believe the concentration camps and the gas chambers could have continued to exist in Germany.
I'd like to comment because I'd like to say that I don't think that there's a major...
So his argument is, if only there was freedom of speech in Germany, then that's what caused Nazis, the lack of freedom of speech. I mean, I've watched a fair amount of World War II history, and let's just move on, man. Let's just move on.
Difference between what Dr. Shockley is doing. I don't think that Dr. Shockley is fully aware of what he is doing and why he is doing what he's doing. But the long-range implications of what he is doing are no different than the propaganda campaign that Hitler and his Nazi unit carried on in Germany that ended up eliminating 6 million Jewish people. Now, what is most interesting is that...
So she just described what the far right... when you go far right too hard, that's what happens. 6 million people die. I want to hear what going too far left, they'll say someone they don't like is leftist. They'll be like, Stalin was a leftist, and like, no, he wasn't. He was a dictator. He was a fascist.
Hitler said the very same thing. He said, number one, that the Jews were genetically inferior to the Aryans. Number two, he was aware that the Semites had genetically dominant genetic material to the Aryans. And if we begin to understand the way that people who were in Europe at the time that the Semites arrived from Africa, when the Semites arrived in Europe from Africa, they were people who had substantial amounts of color and who had very kinky hair because they were from the continent of Africa. And the Europeans, the white people who were there, had a reaction, a color reaction to the Semites that is no different than the reaction and the concern on the part of people who are white in this area of the world or any other area of the world to people who have the genetic capacity to produce color, who can genetically annihilate their position. And I think it's very, very important. Even though Dr. Shockley, I am convinced that Dr. Shockley believes that he is perhaps elevating science with all of his charts and all of his figures, but he doesn't understand the things that propel him as a white individual in a social system that has programmed him throughout his life and programmed large numbers of people like him to focus on the genetics of people of color in such a way as to destroy people of color.
Okay, that is a very, very powerful set of statements. You know, she's kind of giving this man an out. She's actually being very kind. In terms of her analysis, she's saying you're not doing this out of any hatred. You're doing this because you're just very unaware of the system that has caused you to end up in the winter of your life so deeply focused on the genetics of a black man, and it being negative. It needs to be some negative thing that you need to prove to the world that no, black people are genetically inferior. What? I mean, I know that, with people like this, they go with IQ. What else are they going on? Because, because Dr. Frances Cress, she's not done yet.
I would like to ask a question, and Dr. Shockley, if you could answer it yes or no, I would appreciate it. Do you believe that black people are inferior in intelligence?
Ooh, do you think he can answer this yes or no? You think he's going to dance? Do you think he can answer it yes or no? You think he's going to dance?
Because of their heredity?
I have a standard statement. It is not yes or no. It's memorized. I say at the same time every time, I think.
He can't just say yes or no. He can't just say, no, that's not what I'm getting at. He's like, I have a prepared statement. I have a prepared statement. Here it comes, reloading the prepared statement. Here it is.
What I say is this. My research leads me, and it's a tragic conclusion, really.
It's a tragic conclusion. It's going to turn out bad for black people when he says that, And that, again, will it ever not be a tragic conclusion when you study this type of subject, when you're like, I'm interested in IQ of a black man? Is it ever going to come out favorably? I'm studying race, the science of being black. Oh, well, their skull is small. Like, it's never, ever, ever going to be anything but unfortunate, these studies, ever. There's never in the history of man has, someone be like, I'm a race realist, and fortunately, I've learned that black people are actually superior to us, and I better shut the fuck up now. That's your research will never lead you to that. It's always going to lead you to black people suck, and, we should probably do something awful to them as a result.
My research leads me inescapably to the opinion that the major cause of the American Negro's intellectual and social deficits is hereditary and racially genetic in origin, and thus not remediable to a major degree by practical improvements in environment.
They are incorrigible. He just so... OMG, lucky this is 1974, so I don't get that racy feeling in my heart that when I hear people like Ben Shapiro go on Joe Rogan's show and say it, and I'm just like, oh, this is makes me want to puke. At least I have enough separation in time where I'm like, all right, these are different times. I mean, not that things have really changed, but and then you notice he comes onto the show at the beginning. This is what conservatives always do. Oh, I'm not focused on the differences between races. That's not why I'm here. And I'm not racist. And I'm not a Nazi. And then by the end of it, he's saying your genetic inferiority is hereditary. He's like, I'm not here to discuss the. You always know it's coming because literally they've been doing this before the 70s. They've been doing this since World War II. If you study George Rockwell, you will know that they've been doing this shit. So this is like 30 years in the making of this, and we're still doing it and falling for it. So the fact that it's conservatism 101. No, I'm not racist, but by the end of the conversation, black people are genetically hereditarily inferior. But I'm not racist, though, and I'm not here to discuss the differences. It's just that black people are inferior. It's like without fail. And again, this type of shit is just a waste of your time. That's why I don't debate conservatives, because they all do this shit where they pretend they're not saying some fucking shit, and then they are saying that shit. And you're like, dude, if you had just said that at fucking minute one, like, niggas ain't shit, we could just move on. I keep it pushing, dog. Like, most black people, when they hear that white people don't like black people, do you think they're really crying that much? We're kind of like, yeah, kind of figured. I figured he didn't like a nigga. We don't take it like that. Especially when it's one-on-one. We're more worried about systemic racism. I don't really, we kind of make a kind of allowance, a little buffer for, this white person just might not like black people. So let's see how this one goes. Let's wait and see what the shit he says. That's like every white person I meet. I'm like, okay. Which kind are you? Are you the kind that's kind of like chill? Or are you the kind that's like, well, if only black people, if only black, you just gotta, nah.
All right, if you believe that the position relatively of black Americans to white Americans is based on a genetic inferiority, and I will accept the responsibility for that word, then what do you see
Hummy's pissed.
as the solution to the problem?
Well, I see the first aspect of this is to prevent the problem from becoming worse by dysgenics. This first word that
Ding, 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 dysgenics. We got to make them stop having babies. Give the white man a chance. It'll be voluntary, dog. We'll even pay you to not have babies. You know what? If you got a UBI for not having a baby and that UBI stopped when you had a baby, I don't know if I'd be against that shit. You know? But I probably would be. You should just give UBI to everyone, who, regardless, because it's called universal, not you. Otherwise, it'd be called like something else. BI. If you don't have a baby, basic income. But I don't know, right? That'd be an interesting concept. I'm just give everyone money. I don't like this whole thing of eugenics, and it makes me feel disgusting. But you know what I mean? Like the kindest situation that he's presenting is like, okay, everyone gets UBI, but if you don't have kids and you live in a rural area, you get like 500 extra. And then you save up enough money and get into a higher class, and then you can afford your kids. I don't know, maybe. But really just give everybody money so everyone actually does better in life. And if they decide to be dumbasses with it, that's on them. But I don't know. That is terrible. It's like,
Would you translate dysgenics for me and the audience? Would that be sterilization?
No. Dysgenics, you see, means what that other chart I showed you says.
Should blacks,
the least effective element.
Should blacks be sterilized?
No. I have a...
But if blacks are a problem, and we do not allow...
This is inhumane. And
Dr.
I think one can find more humane solutions to this.
Well, then how would... Then
I would propose something in which one of the key phrases is regardless of sex, race, or welfare status. And this is the proposal. I call it a thinking exercise. It's mentioned in that pamphlet that I showed that you can obtain. And it goes this way, that you would offer a bonus to everyone to be sterilized. Now, we know we have a population explosion problem. We know that in India that bonuses in the form of transistor radios are offered to people.
Would this bonus be directed to black people specifically, more than whites?
Mr. Brown, what did I say just a moment ago? I said, regardless of sex...
It's like the dysgenics guys get a little touchy. What did I say? Didn't you see my graph? I had a graph. God damn you. If you had a higher IQ, if you're hereditary genetics, I thought you had that visual acuity, dog. Why are you wearing glasses? He's a failure black person too, because he don't have no visual acuity, and that's the only thing you're good at. And you wearing glasses, dog. Like everybody in my family. We're all failures because we're the blacks without the visual acuity. God damn it. I got the worst of everything. My life. If you ever was like, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, what worse thing could you say to someone than you're genetically inferior? If you truly wanted them to pick themselves up by the bootstraps, why would you not say positive things? Hey, y'all can get education. Y'all can get jobs. Y'all can be better citizens. Why would you say, nah, you're just sucky. You're going to have shitty. How is that helping anything? I don't get that. Like what? Like, why is the solution why is the solution never help people who are struggling with education? And like, why? Like, how much money does that cost versus going to Afghanistan for 20 years? We hadn't gone to Afghanistan for 20 years yet, but we was in conflicts. We'd done Vietnam. We were sending kids out there. No problem. We'll send you out to Vietnam to go kill someone in a jungle you've never been to, and you have no problems with these people. But education, no, that'd be a socialism. I ain't no communist. As long as it's war, it's not communism. It's not socialism.
Sex, race, or welfare status.
Now there is a group.
Dr. Shockley,
There is a group.
That's what I say.
There is a group of white people to whom this offer should be made also.
Absolutely.
What
Now,
group
the
is that?
offer is based upon the best estimate.
The offer is based, yo. He's not saying that.
It's best scientific estimates that one can have of any genetically carried disabilities. Now, there are some, I think, that any humane person would have no doubt about. And Dr. Welsing talked about dominant and recessive genes. I want to point out that sometimes a dominant gene can be a very bad thing, and it is a very bad thing.
But now,
When it's black people, it can be a bad thing. if it was some white shit, it'd be like, well, we dominate. We dominate. Oh, bro, white supremacists, they'll say that shit. Well, we dominate you. But, well, you know, sometimes domination isn't really good. Sometimes having a bigger penis that can stay harder for longer and fuck my wife in a more pleasurable way isn't actually pretty good.
For a neurological disease called Huntington's chorea, which is something
which
like
is more
multiple
prominent
sclerosis.
in white people than black people.
That is correct. And I think that one should offer a large bonus for anyone who might be
Dr.
potentially
Shockley,
carrying Huntington's chorea.
Dr. Shockley,
Beyond
are
this,
you
it goes
aware-
on with some other factors in this, but Dr. Welsing wishes to speak.
Are you aware that white people have more genetic diseases that affect their nervous system than people of color, than black people?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. And I think
Now,
blacks
would you suggest that all...
I thought this guy was the race theory realist, scientific hereditary. Why is that not? Why is what Dr. Francis said, who's a medical doctor, why would that not be factored into your research on whether someone is superior or inferior? In fact, what has he given us that makes white people? I think the IQ. I don't know that. Whatever. You got to watch the video for yourself. I don't really know. Maybe IQ is what he's saying, and like. I know with a lot of white supremacists, they're like, Western civilization, like America was built by white. It wasn't. America, like it. You take high school history in America, it wasn't built by white people at all. Like it was built by some parts were built by white people, but it's mainly built like the actual physical labor was not solely white people. So that idea is that the Western civilization have that, like, oh, my high IQ somehow led me to all of the European cultures that became had these economic boons. A lot of them coincided with the colonialism. So it's almost like you needed your forced labor to build these amazing societies that you now turn around and be like, we built them. Nah, slaves and forced labor built a lot of them, and you just take credit for it. It's kind of like Bloomberg saying, like, I earned my money. It's like, you can't earn billions of dollars like that unless people are earning it for you. There's no one singular job that pays you $1 billion. Even if you're Michael Jordan, you're not going to make $1 billion until it's going to take a minute.
All of these, would you suggest that all of these white people who are carrying these defective genes, whose families may carry these defective genes, that they be examined and it would be suggested to them that they be sterilized? Would you suggest this?
Yes, I think I would, probably, in general.
Go ahead, you're unblocked.
Yes, I think I would, probably in general. Yeah, okay. He's like, yeah, I'd probably like be super ardent if it was black people who want to get sterilized, but if it was a white person want to get sterilized, I'd be like, well, maybe you want to think about it. You sure you don't want to have some babies with another white person? Let's just think about it. He thinks like that program would be administered with like unbiased because racism. I read it in a dictionary and it's not systemic, right, Ben Shapiro? When did the definition changed? What have you researched racism? Like you give a shit? Like I've been researching race relations. No, you haven't. You've been like jacking off about IQs and shit. That's not race relations. That's like phrenology and shit. That's not sociology. Sociology is how people interact with each other, which is largely what racism is. It's the interaction between people of different skin tones. It's not this IQ thing. I don't know. Again, I'm still going back there. I don't know how because they're trying to turn it into their narrative. Like they're just savages. Yeah, they're IQ. They're savages that don't deserve decent. Only another white man deserves, civil discourse or civil treatment, civil rights.
Black Journal, please.
What we know about ancient black civilizations, how can American blacks suddenly be genetically regressive?
Thank you.
Let me just say this. What is very interesting is in the study of biology, biologists who have studied evolution, one of the very interesting things that they say is that the more functional skin pigment cells in the animal kingdom, the higher you are on the scale of phylogenetic ascension. In other words, nature in the course of evolution went to its highest state when it produced a cell that could produce pigment, and that we were sliding backwards. The mutation to albinism is a step backwards in the scale of evolution. Are you aware of that, Dr. Shockley?
No, I'm not aware of that particular one. I am aware of another basic genetic difference, and that is that the...
He's like, no, I'm not aware of this one, but have you heard of this genetic difference, that black people are sucky? That's a genetic difference. They suck more.
rate of maturation of a neurological system gets longer and longer the more advanced the animal is. And that is one of the items on the racial difference, that the neurological development of blacks is faster than whites. Black babies walk on the average a month earlier than white babies. And the period of
black
gestation...
people are much more creative also than white.
Dr. Wells, Shockley, correct me.
Are black people much more creative? I mean, if you look at American music since... I don't know, since minstrelsy, since like the 1800s, been pretty dominated by like black culture, the music industry. So, I mean, I don't know if black people are more or less creative, but at least in America, they dominate the creative landscape as far as what's on the radio and what type of influence is on the music and kind of fashion.
If I'm incorrect, didn't the Giselle schedule, which tested the intelligence of children, make a correlative between intelligence and walking early?
Yes.
And I would think it probably would have been negative.
No, it was not. It was positive.
They called him out. They're like, walking early means you're dumber. This guy is off the chains. If you walk earlier, you're dumber. It's just, what? He's like, literally, he's one of those, he's like a sniper. Anything a black does, he's like, actually, that's a negative thing. Actually, that's not, actually, when white people walk later, it's a sign of long-term intelligence. Like, you just got to twist that shit. They're like, no. They're like, no, you're wrong.
Well, the motor skills on the Giselle schedule indicated that earlier precocious walking children, there was a correlation between that and high intelligence.
This may be true. It might be true within a group. I'm not sure of that.
Well, maybe
I know that the...
This is like, I love it how, like, I thought you were the race theorist, dog. How come you, at least if, at worst, all of these points they're bringing up, he should have ready answers to debunk them or say, I mean, he don't even know they exist. Nowadays, like, the people nowadays, they're more insidious. No, you're wrong. That's not a true static. That they'll just lie harder. He's gotta like oh my God. Let's see how goofy. Let's see him start getting goofy. Just a Nobel Prize winner, and he'd be getting goofy at the end.
Didn't the Giselle schedule, which tested the intelligence of children,
like Frank, they just got into a boxing match. She done just rung his bell, and he kind of like
children make a correlative between intelligence and walking early?
Yes.
And I would think it probably would have been negative.
No, it was not. It was positive.
Well, the
motor skills
they hit him.
on the Giselle schedule indicated that earlier precocious walking children,
finish him.
There was a correlation between that and high intelligence.
This may be true. It might be true within a group. I'm not sure of that.
Well, maybe
I know that there is a correlation in terms of things earlier than walking. In this, at the 6-month stage, Nancy Bailey at Berkeley has established that white children who come from the most advanced families and who later, when they become older, are out at the top, at the first 6 months they are relatively retarded compared to children who are from families of less accomplishment and who don't go as far. But this, so there are a number of these things certainly to be brought in.
Fine.
But this
Giselle schedule is a very...
So when you're rich, you're kind of lazy at the beginning, but you figure it out later. It's got nothing to do with the money, though. This guy is such a clown. But shout out to you, William Shockley, for coming on to a black show with a black audience where you get questions from black people asking you about your theory. The conservatives nowadays, they do not do that shit. They talk shit, but they'll never go and talk to some black people about it, ever. Never, never, never. They don't do that shit no more. So shout out to Shockley. And shout out to Dr. Francis. Z'd up to the maximum. You part of the gang. And Dr. Francis, you are not Z. Ooh, some takeaways from this. This is the formula for how this type of white supremacist in circa 1974 was the most insidious type. He's calm. He has a suit and tie. This fool is a professor. Semiconductors, Nobel Peace Prize winner. But here's the problem: is why are you talking about race? That's not even in your expertise. The one who's closer to talk about human biology is the medical doctor than you. So, I mean, as far as expertise, Dr. Francis' expertise would, when she's talking about neurological diseases, being a doctor and relating that to genetic, I hate superiority, whatever. She would have that information, whereas you know about semiconductors, which actually don't really have anything to do with race, unless your argument is my IQ as a white man is I'm the only one who could have invented that shit. Then that's another thing. But I mean, ultimately, this is how they work. He's calm. He's got little glasses on. He's just like, this is some good, not Z propaganda. I'm not racist. I'm not, I don't hate black people. If you are saying that I am, maybe you're the racist. But I'm not talking about the racial difference. But then at the end of the conversation, it's black people are hereditarily inferior. Let me prove it to you. He doesn't bring up any proof. The proof that he tries to bring up, they both debunk it, and he has nothing to go by. It's just classic. But to see, again, conservatives learned, don't go on black shows because they already know Nazis really quick. They don't mess with Nazis like that. Go to Joe Rogan, he'll mess with you. That's why, like, the closest thing we've had in recent times is like when Tommy Lauren went on The Breakfast Club, and black people were not having that shit. Black people were like, fuck that shit. We've seen all that Nazi shit before. This is not white mainstream media where we're like, let's fuck around with Gavin McInnes. Gavin McInnes and Spence, they're never getting on the Breakfast Club. They'll get on Joe Rogan, but they'll never get on the Breakfast Club because they already know what it is. Joe Rogan will pretend like, oh, I don't know what it is. He knows what it is. I think he knows what it is, but he'll still let those fools go. So it's like the black community, they already know this. They just don't do this shit anymore. Like, this was kind of like the heydays of this up into the 80s. They were like, yeah, let's have. Then we started to realize these fools don't give a fucking shit about nothing. They just want to annihilate you, and they're using calmness and like a suit and tie and their credentials to make it seem like it's reasonable, and it's not some radical anti-American, anti-patriotic, anti-free speech, pro like death camp, pro Nazi shit. That's what he is. Eugenics. Oh, it's not that bad. Okay, he not Z'd up. Thank you, my Zgan. Love you so much. Thank you for watching.